Okay, I have completed my pair of moccasins. I'm now going to get them prepared to put them together. So first of all, you fold your moccasin in half and you draw a light line. Doesn't have to be a heavy line. Draw a light line to give you an idea where you're going to cut. You lay it flat and you draw another line across where you're going to cut for the tongue. Make sure and leave a little space because that's where you're going to sew the tongue onto. And then you've got your lines, you're ready to cut. So you can cut along the line. Making sure to leave that space so you can sew the tongue. Cut as close as possible to your edge. There you go. I'm ready to cut out the tongue. So first of all, we have to measure how wide we need the tongue. So in this case, it's 3.5 inches. And then how high we need the tongue, which would be 2 inches. So on a piece of paper, you measure out your 3.5 inches, and sort of rectangle, you measure out the 2 inches, such as this. And then you can draw a line if you like, to give you a rough idea. Then you cut it out. And from this you can round it off on each side to look such as that. Match it up with the tongue there, and so when you sew it on, it's going to look perfectly. So then you take your piece of leather and you draw it on, and then we can cut it out. Okay, so I've cut out both the tongues. They both match up with the cut that I've made in the moccasin, so we're going to set them aside now and get back to them later. We will cut out the soles next. There are various types of leathers we can use to cut out soles. I'm using buffalo hide today, and so to cut out your soles, you place your leather along edge, saving close to the edges as possible. Trace along your foot pattern that you already have. Then you flip it over so you have a left side and a right side. Close to the other pattern, you copy your foot again. So you have your left side and your right side, and you're ready to cut them out. Now going to speak about welts. Welts is the fine little piece of leather that is sewn between the moccasin and the sole. And this welt provides protection for the stitches that is used as we sew the two together in there as well. And the welt is used all around the sole, up the side, and even between the tongue and the moccasin itself. The welts I usually make out of scrap pieces of leather. However, if you do have enough hide to cut a long strip, it's mainly just a long string of leather, whatever length you have, but they're about 1/4 inch that we cut so we can fit it between the moccasin and the sole. So these are what welts are, and that is the purpose it serves. We have all the parts that we need here. We have the upper beaded part cut out and ready to go. We have the soles cut out and ready to go. We have the tongues cut out, and we have the welts. So the next thing we're going to do is we are going to assemble the moccasin so it looks completely finished, such as this little one here. So the next step we have to do is, using a welt, we have to sew up the back, and then we have to attach the sole to the moccasin using a welt in the center between the moccasin and the sole to attach it all together and to sew it up. And then next would come the tongue. We'd have to use a welt again to sew the tongue once we turn the moccasin right side out. To start sewing the moccasins together, you need to use a glover's needle. The glover's needle has a triangular point at the end that will go through completely through the leather and the sole and the welt, so you need to use a glover's needle. We're going to use sinew. If you're going to use sinew just the way it's sold like this is definitely too big, so you have to split it. Split it by just breaking it apart, such as this. Put your fingers through it and run it down, and it will naturally come apart wherever it is naturally, I guess is the word. So it's going to come apart in 4 pieces. So there's 1, 2, and if you keep running your finger down, it'll come apart in 2 more pieces somewhere down the line. So then we end up with nice little pieces such as this, or thinner pieces that you can actually now fit through your glover's needle. So you'll have 4 little pieces instead of the 1 large one, and it is much easier to thread, such as this. Before you start sewing, make sure you tie at least 2 or more knots at the end, because 1 knot is not going to be enough. It's going to come apart, so you tie 1 and a second one over and pull it really tight, and there you go, you're ready to start. We're going to attach the moccasin to the sole, so make sure you have the left side going with the left side or the right with the right, making sure the bottom side is the slippery side, matching this, because once we start we're going to flip it over because we're going to sew this inside out, and I'm going to tack it down in 3 places. So first of all, on the top we're going to tack it here. So tacking means just doing 1 stitch and tying a knot. And cutting it. And I will do it again on each side, so making sure you match it up as it goes along. And we'll do another tack here. You can use a pliers to pull out your thread if it is a little hard to do because you're sewing a different texture of leather. And I'll run this along the edge and tack it again there. And then finally we're going to tack it at the back, but before we tack the back we have to put the welt in and sew it together. So in order to add the welt, you put in your piece of leather, the welt, make sure the 2 ends match on the edge, similar to that, and then you sew it up, or you sew it together, such as this. And you continue sewing this way until you get to the end. I've completed sewing up the back of the moccasin with the welt in between, and this is what it looks like from the outside. and on the inside, and then I have put my final tack here at the back, so right in the middle of the sole. So it's all tacked down and all the places should meet as you start sewing it together. So you grab your first piece of welt, you put it anywhere between the moccasin and the sole where you're going to start your stitching. You don't necessarily have to start it there. You can start it a little further down and start your stitching through there, making sure this welt is through there all the way through. And as you get to here, you can cut that and put the welt in there and just keep on going all the way around. When you run out of, your welt comes to an end, just grab another one and add it in there and just keep on going all the way around. I've come to the end of my thread here. I'm going to tie a knot. So I'm going to tie 2 of them. And in order to hide the knot so it's not bumpy there, I sew back through it again at least a couple of times and pull the thread tight so the knot is gone back into the leather sort of, and it's not sticking out as much. So I tie 2 knots, sew it back through, and then cut it. And then I'm ready to start the next one. I've sewn the moccasin all together. Now it's time to turn it the right side out. So I usually start from the toe and turn it all in and pull it out. Some people start from the heel and turn it out. There's no right way, there's no wrong way, there's just different ways of doing it. So you just squish it all in through. If you tied knots good when you were beading, you should have no problem of the beading coming apart. It is. Then I trim off the little edges, make sure and don't cut your knots or your sewing. I just trim the edges so they look all nice and even, and I do that all the way around, and then I'm ready to sew on the tongue. So in order to place the tongue, I mentioned the welt earlier. I placed the welt in between the moccasin and the tongue, and from this side I sewed it on over stitch from one end to the other. I marked 2 lines where I want to punch the holes for the laces, and how you would do that is where the lines are, either way you can fold it there and just snip it with the scissors, making each little hole for your laces. The next thing to do is to make a cuff, an ankle cuff. You cut a rectangular piece of leather such as this that will fit around the ankle, and from the inside, making sure you have the outside to match the outside of your moccasin. Place it in there, leaving a little bit of an edge, and again you overstitch it all the way around. And if you have a little excess, you can cut it off there. Once you fold it over, it will look like this. To fold it over and with the trimmed edges. Then lastly, there are 2 ways to put on the lace. You can attach the lace to the end, just like this, and put it through the holes, and that's how it's done on the baby moccasins. You just attach it on the edge. Or for a power dancer, I lace the lace all the way around the ankle, so when they pull it tight, it's tight and firm for their dancing. And then you tie it up, and there you go, you have the finished pair of moccasins.